Right, guys, I have seen the Flash movie. Finally, because it feels like everyone and their grandma has seen it. Not even just the press screenings, all of those fan screenings, but no, seriously, thanks to Warner Brothers for inviting me to go see it. I went up to London, watched it last night, and this, right off the bat, is a no spoilers review. Those of you who are familiar with my channel should know that I take pride in not giving anything away. Do not be deterred by the video's length. That doesn't mean, oh, surely he's going to have to give away spoilers eventually if it's that long. No, I can just talk for a while. So I will be coming out with a spoiler review because obviously with such a kind of multiverse-esque movie and, you know, even with regards to the script, there's just certain things that I can't get into. So with this, though, I do still have a lot to say. What I want to tackle right away before getting to specific parts like, oh, how was Keaton? How was Supergirl? What was both Barrys like in the movie? What's the movie like in general? Because the big consensus coming out of CinemaCon was this is the greatest comic book movie since The Dark Knight. And then even after that, at some press screenings, people were saying similar things. But some people were saying other things, not like knocking it, because that is actually quite a rare thing to see, because this movie has been highly praised from critics. I would say I'm more in the line of those saying it's a fun celebration of DC. Its main attraction is for sure through and through the heart of the story, because, I mean, after all, given the premise of Flashpoint and what Barry is striving to do, it's very, very hard to not do something with that, with him wanting to save his mum. So, you know, that is a very, very focal and crucial point to what makes this movie quite successful from what everyone is saying. But I wouldn't call it like, oh, this is the best comic book movie I've ever seen. But that's not me saying at the same time that it's bad. Even though what I do want to say is no movie is perfect. It's not without its flaws. I do have a lot of praise to say about this movie, but I do actually have one or two major issues, believe it or not, that somewhat rubbed me the wrong way personally. And we'll get into that in the latter of this review after, you know, talking about a bunch of other things that I just felt was a bit of a shame for a movie that relies so heavily on this factor. But I do know that some people are going to have different opinions about this, because I've seen some people say, oh, this part or this aspect of what goes into the movie is phenomenal. But I'm just like, and I don't know, we're going to have to talk about this later, but I'm just like, did you see what I saw? Like, I don't understand. So yeah, it could be like a thing of standards. Some people might be like really fine with things like that. But without being so ambiguous here, we will get to that eventually. So I do think that general audiences, and this is a big thing, right? Like, there's a big comic book fandom when it comes to these movies. Obviously, DC fans are going to see a DC movie. Marvel fans will see a DC movie and vice versa. But general audiences, Joe down the street, his granddad, his dad, Max, who's 62, still might see this movie, and that is a big, 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 big part of the audience, right? All of those who grew up in the early 70s and, you know, saw Batman as a teenager or whatever, they're probably going to see it. So I do think general audiences, this will be a big hit. It's comedic, it resonates with a really deep emotional core, and some of those scenes in particular with Barry's mum were for sure like some of my favorite in the entire movie. And arguably those, given the story, needed to be executed very, very well. And I'm happy to say that given that is the very concept and premise of this story, it is not Flashpoint as we heard way back in the day at DC Fandom, but it's a version of Flashpoint that's a little bit different, and they nailed those aspects on the head. So the very intro to the movie, I thought, yes, like that is a very, very smart way to go. It is absolutely fantastic in terms of it just thrusts you right into it. You're not like picking up with like, hi, my name's Barry Allen, I've been doing this kind of thing. It's like wham, smack, bam, straight into it. Batfleck is featured towards the very beginning of the movie. He is great. I completely agree with what Ben Affleck said. I mean, you may disagree with, you know, in terms of what is peak Batman. You may say that's when we saw him in Zack Snyder's Justice League. And I'm not really disagreeing there. But what I'm saying is when you see Batfleck in Batman mode on the Batcycle in the beginning here, it is just badass when you see him on the grappling hook in the trailers and you see that in the full context of, you know, now you're seeing it in the movie. It is really, really, really good. And then eventually when you get the Bruce Wayne scenes at Barry's apartment and whatnot, where he's like, oh, you can destroy everything. Like all of that is just, I'm getting chills. Like seriously, because it's melancholy at the same time, because for all intents and purposes, this is the last time we're seeing him. And Ben Affleck says he kind of felt like, hey, I feel like I really nailed the role here. And I totally get what he means by that, because when we see Batman here, it's kind of like a day in the life of the Justice League, right? It's like, Barry, I need you here now. The Flash comes to help without giving too much away here. It's a fun action sequence. It demonstrates the Speed Force very, very well. And Batfleck is badass and all of that, but it's just, he does it so smoothly. And it's like, yes, like there's Ben Affleck. He is Batman. And then even when you get to the Bruce Wayne scene after that, it's like, oh, damn, he is so Bruce Wayne as well. And going back to what I meant with the use of Flash's powers, I mean, obviously, right at the beginning, with what I'm describing here, you will see the Flash use his powers, and it was honestly really top notch. And I would say you get a lot of that featured towards the beginning, but all the way throughout the movie, they really... if you're a Flash fan, I mean, I know all of Flash's powers, whether it's obviously time travel. I mean, that's more of a consequence of what he's doing, but phasing or this, that, and the other. It's really, really well done, and you get a lot of it at the beginning, yet you still see extra bits and bobs trickled throughout. And again, as the Flash is my favorite kind of meta-human character in the DC universe, because Batman, my favorite vigilante, and before anyone says, well, aren't these other heroes vigilante? You know what I mean. I'm talking about human versus meta-human. He's my favorite meta, if you will. It was great in terms of seeing the Scarlet Speedster's abilities used in this way. Now, as we know with Flashpoint, Barry runs back in time because he wants to save his mum. And I really like with this iteration how they explored those scenes, which even motivates Barry to go back in time in the first place, how he actually even discovers how he can do that in the first place. All while these scenes are going along, obviously Henry Allen is in the movie as well. I don't want to give anything away too much there. I mean, you've seen Henry Allen in the trailers, but, you know, again, it's always tapping into, you know, there's some fun scenes, and that's very, very fluent throughout the movie, but then it really nicely meshes with what the emotional core is, with what Barry is dealing with at this point in his life, and, well, really his whole life, up until this precipice of where it's like, right, yeah, I think I need to do something about it, which then gives us the whole movie with Barry screwing the timeline, which nicely highlights what the theme of this movie is going for. It is touched on at so many points, but the whole idea is not every problem has a solution. It's okay to move on, and it plays well with teaching just Barry a lesson, which is the whole shtick of Flashpoint anyway, and they have like a really nice rendition of that. And this kind of brings me on to Ezra Miller. Now, I have to admit here, and I didn't really expect this movie, finally seeing Ezra in the Solo movie, made me feel a way about Ezra's Flash that I didn't quite expect. Now, for context here, this goes way back to my thoughts long before the recent years of controversy. Ever since we first saw Ezra as Barry, I kind of have felt like it was a miscast. I always felt, as I've said, if you've been here long enough, that it's more of a quirky Allen rather than Barry Allen. With the Flash being one of my favorite DC characters, I was just like, but I don't see it. And this, again, was long before any of the real-life drama started to happen. Speaking of Ezra Miller drama, I do want to make it very clearly known that I am not one of those reviewers reviewing a movie, yet while reviewing the movie, reviewing Ezra's real-world actions as if that has something to do with the piece of art or product that you're reviewing. I am reviewing Ezra's performance as an actor. Now, that's not to say if you don't want to see this movie because of that and you have a bitter taste in your mouth, fair enough, that's your choice. But I just find it very weird that some professional critics out there review a film and take real-life stuff into a work of fiction. No matter what, you're reviewing the film, the product, the actor, and the performance. So again, within the scope of reviewing an actor's work of whom has been cast as the lead in this movie, how was their performance now that Ezra has their own movie and solo movie to shine as the Flash? Well, I actually for sure came around to their take on Barry Allen. Acting-wise, Ezra did a fantastic job on both Barrys that we see in the movie. And I really, really wholeheartedly mean that. Like, throughout the film, and then when it came to the more emotional scenes, Ezra gave it everything. And honestly, you can't knock the performance here. It was actually really, really good, to the point of where I can now gel a lot more with, okay, you know, I still don't think it would be my casting, but compared to my opinion before, now that we've got a lot more content, a lot more ability for Ezra to show off their acting performance, their ability to finally show a whole movie's worth of this take on the character, I can see a lot more of the Barry-isms in Ezra's take. And that was a huge win for me, because I was worried that I would still struggle with that when watching the film. I think what was most important to me was to finally see the endearing side of Ezra's take on Barry. And once again, as I'll keep saying throughout this review, given this story, the very premise of what Barry is trying to do, you 100% finally get to see that. And this is when, through Barry traveling back in time to save his mum, he meets the other Barry, which is obviously a huge part of this movie, and the performance, because Ezra succeeds at acting as both the DCEU Barry and the kind of younger, more obnoxious, intentionally obnoxious, mind you, younger Barry. Like, he's meant to be a younger, annoying, less experienced, and also having lived a very different life. It's as Ezra Miller even said on the red carpet. Their life experience has defined them differently, with different outlooks, which makes sense. One Barry has lost his mother, and so you'd be shaped completely differently. And then, obviously, if you change things back in time, well, one Barry has grown up with something that the other Barry hasn't. And as a result of that, one is seasoned, has gone through a lot of heartache and pain. And then the younger Barry, who's never really had to go through any of that stuff, who's had the privilege of a cushy life. The way they have both developed is fundamentally different. Seeing both Barrys navigate the story that they're given now that there's a bit of a disaster going on through completely different life experiences is a brilliant tool to propel the main theme of the movie forward. And again, the way they make it work and the way they interact is very well done, VFX aside. I do want to say as well, and I didn't actually know if I would get like this, because I knew it would be emotional, but I still didn't know if it would hit me. But I did get teary at a couple of scenes. Again, I didn't know if that would happen compared to what we saw with Grant Gustin's version of The Flash, with what they've explored with a similar story. But if you know what I'm on about, and I'm sure some of you can imagine what I'm on about with certain scenes in terms of Barry reconnecting with his mother, any Flash fan would be engrossed with scenes like that. And I do want to emphasize, it is truly the beating heart of the movie, and they are very, very, very strong scenes. And that's what I mean, like when Ezra is in those moments, they really give it their all. And I still don't think, for me though, say what you will about the CW, because some people will be watching this being like, why are you comparing it to the CW? But seriously, I don't think it does top what happened there, but I can't deny that they still do a nice take on it. Now, there are certain things that I do want to say about how some of this stuff works, the timey-wimey aspects of it, Nora's murder, the circumstances surrounding that, and that's not a spoiler. I mean, for crying out loud, that's the very freaking concept of Flashpoint. After all, Nora dies, Barry goes back in time, tries to stop that. Not a spoiler, but there are criticisms I have that I just can't remotely get into here without spoiling it. So again, I'll save that for the spoiler review. Now, let's get on to Michael Keaton's Batman return. I mean, I'm a big Batman fan. There's a lot of Bat family members here on the channel, and his inclusion was a really nice fit. I think what a lot of people are worried about these days with these kind of multiversal-esque movies, and this isn't me knocking No Way Home, because I really do love seeing Willem Dafoe as Norman Osborn again, but the whole, I'm something of a scientist myself, and of course, there's lines like that here, where if you want to get nuts, let's get nuts. Or like, I'm Batman, where it's just like, we know you're Batman. Why are you kind of saying that? So of course, there are things like that, but I would say for the most part, it is really organically woven in, like Barry traveling back in time. As a result of those timeline changes, it's like, okay, well, he's Batman now, and his role throughout the movie, it doesn't feel like cheese outside of those nostalgia kind of baity moments. But his addition really does fit like a glove, which was a nice, pleasant surprise to me. Because I think I knew I would enjoy him regardless. I low-key expected the expected nostalgia stuff. But I didn't know if his inclusion and addition to the movie itself would be as natural and as organic as I was hoping it would be, and actually what it was. So I definitely say that he put those bat shoes back on in the way that Keaton Batman fans will really, really enjoy. The scenes that he shared with Barry, like the DCEU Barry, were great. His action as Batman is badass. It's like a nice modern iteration on what you'd expect if Keaton's Batman was shot in today's Hollywood. I mean, of course, if you are quite the fan of Michael Keaton's Batman, there's so many other moments which naturally flow with the nostalgia warmth, which aren't so on the nose as what I meant with some of those lines, but just things like the music playing, like the and just the badass moments that subsequently happen when that music is playing. The Batwing is absolutely epic. Now, as for Sasha Calle's Supergirl, I thought she was great. But one thing that caught me off guard is that I thought she was quite short-lived. You know, a lot of people have been memeing on this movie, being like, oh, it's a Flash movie, but clearly a Batman movie and Supergirl. I don't think people realize that it is very, 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 very times 1,000 Barry Allen's movie. Keaton is in it a lot more than Sasha Calle's Supergirl, but I honestly thought there would be more Supergirl because, again, I'm only going to reference stuff in the trailer. After the initial rescue of Supergirl and just, a couple of moments after that, you're then just in the third act and it's like the battle outside Metropolis with all the Kryptonians and Zod, and then it's just, I would say most of the shots of Sasha Calle are VFX. I mean, obviously, some aren't, but do you see what I mean? I kind of wanted to see more of her, but what we did get from her was really, really awesome. She envelops the character really well. It just felt like she was kind of dropped in there, and we didn't get so much of her as what I would have wanted to see. And again, when we kind of got to the final moments of her appearance in the movie, I would say it was like 2/3 CGI render models of Sasha Calle's Supergirl. Of course, like a close-up shot of her face and acting out the rest of that scene. But yeah, just like 1/3 of actually Sasha Calle and then 2/3 VFX, which is... Again, we're going to get to that part because, as for Zod, Michael Shannon is awesome. But I would say don't get too hyped. If you're going into this being like, oh man, Zod, yes, right, Zod's coming back. Don't get me wrong. You see Michael Shannon, and he is great. He plays the role. But, he's kind of a tool for the movie. It's not like we're seeing the Black Zero event for the first time in Man of Steel. So those events play out again in this timeline, and you'll see him from the distance and still doing his thing as per what he's trying to do with the Black Zero event, but it's not like you're going to get close-up perspectives and conversations of him being like, right, we're going to go do this now. We're going to, all of that stuff. It's more like the world building of it. Of course, I'm not saying that he's not in it. It's just that he's more of a background character. Even when it comes to the confrontation scenes, they are brief. I wouldn't say it's like an epic confrontation other than the whole, what did you do? From Sasha Calle. Again, she was awesome. All of that side comes from her awesome performance. But yeah, Zod is just there. So overall, just kind of reviewing like the first act, the second act, and the third act, I would say I feel like the pacing of the film was really decent. Like when it picks up, as I said, you're launched right into it. Then when we go into the middle, getting into Michael Keaton Batman stuff, I don't feel like it meanders too much. Everything is still moving along pretty nicely. And again, at this point, you're like, oh, like, okay, we're at the Keaton part of the movie, and now we need to plan on what we're doing next to stop Zod. But when it gets to the third act, that's when I would say it does kind of dip quite a bit to the kind of aspect in terms of the pacing. It did feel a bit rushed in a certain sense. I feel like if the movie was maybe a little bit longer, perhaps this could have been fleshed out a bit more to not feel so abrupt. And what I actually mean by the somewhat abrupt aspect of the final act of the movie is the villain of the story, of which I do want to say it's an interesting way they conduct it. It's not so like, hey, Man of Steel, Zod is the villain of the story. Superman's going to stop him. There is a villain in this story, but what I will say is with the abrupt aspect of how this is kind of brought in, I will say that it does make sense within the theme of what they're exploring throughout the movie, but it just does feel like things all of a sudden escalate very, very quickly in the third act that just don't feel as organic of an escalation as what it could have. It could have been handled a little bit better because it comes out of nowhere and you're like, oh, okay, I see what you're going for, but like, This just happened. What it has going for it is, as I said, there is context there, but I wouldn't say it's like overwhelmingly or remotely overwhelmingly mind-blowing. So okay, but at least it has the underlying theme that it has been setting up all along, which I can't really say is said for, like, again, I'm just going to use Black Adam's Sabak example, which was just god-awful in my opinion. Hey, I'm going to become this villain because my ancient ancestor was going to do it. He couldn't quite do it, so now I'm going to do it. So here I am. Here's my zombies. Try and stop me. It's not that weak, yet not that great at the same time. Okay, so what I want to say now with regards to this no spoiler review is my biggest criticism, and honestly a massive distracting aspect from the movie for me, and that is the VFX. So I do want to stress, because I know there's some fans out there who have seen this movie who be like,
I don't know what you're on about. Why can't you just enjoy the movie?
This isn't me saying every last millimeter of the VFX in the movie is bad. There is cool moments, such as the perspective of Barry's speed and other things like that. In fact, awesome at times. Let that be known. But for me, I knew going in that the VFX would be wonky in places, such as, you know, the fact that we have Ezra Miller DCEU Barry, and then we have the younger Barry. And some scenes within the frame, you have Ezra Miller, and then you'd have a body double with the digitized Ezra Miller face snapped onto the body double's face. And sometimes the use of instead of using the actor at all, let's just throw in a rendered 3D model of the entire body of the character there. Sometimes even in close-up shots, and I'm just like, why didn't you just get Ezra to put on the suit and do that close-up shot? It's weird. But honestly, like, the main gripe for me is that I really didn't expect the consistency of dodgy shots here. And this is mainly for me, the use of both Barrys. I think why it stood out like a sore thumb most of all is because when a movie such as The Flash relies so heavily on this VFX being used in most of the scenes in the movie, it does stand out like a sore thumb, because both Barrys consist of at least 80% of the movie's scenes. And so when you see the short-haired DCEU Barry and then the younger Barry in frame at the same time, whether it's from the side or from the front, it really does consistently come across like this weird uncanny valley effect to the absolute extreme. Now, I do want to say there are some shots where I'm like, okay, that's not so bad, but I would say that's like really few and far between. Most of the time, it comes across like, I don't want to sound so harsh on this, but this is how like unsatisfactory I found it. It came across like a Snapchat filter at times, because it was just all around this area. There was this clay-like texture, and I thought surely you could have polished this more. Now, there are certain scenes, I don't want to give anything away here. I mean, everyone knows about certain cameos, so I'm on about like those kind of scenes, or whenever you might see a character in those kind of scenes. That is when, what I will say, when, you know, considering we were just talking about the both Barrys, the use of the body double thing, the technology they're using there to have Ezra doubled on the screen at the same time being a bit wonky, and quite often at times very wonky. These scenes with the cameos or just any characters that pop up in the particular scenes that I can't give too much away about, that is when it's like AI art. I'm not going to hold back on this one, or like the Twilight baby CGI. Again, I'm not trying to go hard here. I'm just being honest, but it is so obviously fake to the point of where some people are calling these particular scenes like a deliberate choice. And if that's the case, it's like, well, okay. And to be honest, with some of it, it's like, well, yeah, I don't understand how you would have done that without CGI. Fair enough. So those scenes, deliberate choice or not, are very, very fake. But like you could maybe digest that and just find it like really cool given the context of what you're seeing anyway. But bottom line for me, even outside those scenes, which, you know, are the fakest, the scenes of both Barrys, I just don't understand it. Maybe some people might throw defense out there saying, oh, this is like maybe a newer technology where, you know, you have Ezra Miller and then you have the body double there, and, you know, it was pretty cool, right? But I'm just like, it still feels like it needed way more polishing. I don't know. I know, considering how long I've gone on about this, people could be like, bro, like, I feel like you really overreacted here or something, but I don't see, like, I saw it on like a crystal clear IMAX screen. Maybe that will make it more transparent compared to if you just see it at your local movie theater and you're seeing on a bit of a, sometimes the screens are a bit like poor or blurry, whatever. Maybe it'll be a bit more digestible there. But what I will say is pay attention to when there are two Barrys in the same frame. Obviously, I'm not talking about if it cuts to just seeing one Barry at a time, because then they would swap out Ezra wearing long hair and the shorter hair. Then it's like actually Barry's face. I do want to make it clear, though, this is mainly just restricted to the face, because obviously from here downwards, it would be the body double wearing whatever the younger Barry is wearing. I do want to make it known as well, they do interchange it. Sometimes the DCEU Barry is the one with the masked face, and sometimes, I would say most often, it's the other Barry. But overall, guys, I have to say, like, there is cool VFX in this movie with the way they explore the Flash's powers, the aspect of speed here and there and whatnot. The Batwing is awesome. But I would say I was really disappointed by the VFX. Biggest gripe with the movie. And I'm really not normally that nitpicky on VFX. I'm really not, but that should tell you something. Now, coming to the end of the review, some other things I may have forgot to mention, like Iris West's inclusion was quite nice. We got more of her than I expected. They kind of set up a little bit of a wavelength there. I can't really talk too much about the cameos. I do feel what I will say is they could have done a lot more there, and it is actually, from what some of the answers we've had from Andy Muschietti and others, it doesn't make sense why they couldn't do some other things. It kind of really is perplexing. As for the ending, I saw the full version and everything like that. It's pretty cool. The stuff has been out there. I wouldn't, again, with some of the stuff that's been said, all these extra secrets that we've heard of that will be in the full version no. I mean, I saw everything that I kind of heard about. It was kind of a cool ending, and it can definitely lead somewhere, but I definitely don't think that this ending would be the DCU continuation, if that makes sense. I do want to make it clear that doesn't mean that there wouldn't be a sequel in terms of if they, I mean, as we know, a script's already been written, but it's been very clear what James Gunn has said, and with the ending of this movie, it 100% doesn't sync up with the future DCU that we know. But that doesn't mean that they can't still retrofit that into something in the future even though many people are saying, oh yeah, as if this is going to get a sequel. It can happen, ultimately. I can't get into spoilers here, but the current ending that we have isn't continuity-wise adhering to what we know about the future. But as for the ending anyway, with the theme and the full circle moment that somewhat happens here, it is satisfying in terms of where things ultimately end up for the main character of Barry Allen. It's also heartbreaking at the same time. Again, the strongest thing for the movie is its big, big, big heart, and that's, threaded right at the beginning, to the middle, to the very, very end. There is a post-credit scene, just one, that some of you may already know about. Be careful of spoilers out there. I don't really know what to say about this. I do get what some people were saying with how a lot of people were scrutinizing it with regards to how they made it silly, or this particular character silly. I want to stress as well that this scene was shot a long, long time ago, but the lines were ADR'd to be a bit different given the changes of direction in the DCU. But ultimately, my view on this scene in general is just somewhat inconsequential. It's not like it's not remotely an important post-credit scene. It's just like, oh, there's a little post-credit scene for fun, but it might piss off some of the hardcore legacy fans of the Snyderverse if you're kind of in that camp. But ladies and gentlemen, that is my no spoilers review of the Flash movie. Yet again, another long, rambly one. I do think, if you're curious about it and you want to see Michael Keaton's Batman, you want to see the Flash story, you want to see Ben Affleck's Batman, you want to see just a DC movie that celebrates a lot of DC, I would recommend seeing it. I do think it's a fun time. It has a very emotional story, as what you'd expect. As I've said 1,000 times before in this video, I laughed, I got teary-eyed. As a Flash fan, there was really, really cool moments in it. As a Batman fan, really, really cool moments in it. I don't think it's the best comic book movie in the world. However, I do think it's a pretty decent comic book movie all round when you take everything into account, from the story, the performances, the action sequences that we get and whatnot. But yeah, I would love to know what you guys think. If you've seen the movie, please do not spoil it down in the comments below. Just let me know what you thought of my thoughts. Do you agree? Do you disagree? As I said, I'll go over a more detailed spoiler review, getting into some more of the specific parts about the movie. But yeah, I hope you enjoyed this rambly review of The Flash, guys. I'd really appreciate a like if you did enjoy it. Do consider subscribing if you enjoy DC reviews, breakdowns, news, updates, and everything like that. This is the place for you. But until next time, guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a lovely rest of your day, and I'll see you speedsters in the next video. Goodbye.